He hired her to scrub floors, not to turn his fragile princess into a weapon. Kalen Caruso. The most feared Don in New York had one rule regarding his blind daughter Sophia. She is glass. Do not touch her. Do not break her. The world saw a ruthless killer, but at home he was a terrified father trying to shield his child from his own bloody legacy. So the moment he walked into the nursery and saw the new maid, Rachel, pinning his daughter against the wall with a blade in her hand, Kalen didn't ask questions. He raised his gun. He was ready to paint the walls red, but he didn't know that the blade wasn't a threat. It was a lesson, and the truth behind why the maid was teaching a blind girl to kill. It would bring the great Mafia Boss to his knees. The rain in Chicago didn't wash away the sins of the city. It just made the pavement slicker for the bodies to slide. Kalen Caruso stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, the glass reflecting a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. At 34, he was the head of the Caruso crime syndicate. He wore bespoke Italian suits that cost more than most people's cars, specifically tailored to hide the shoulder holster housing his custom .45. "The nanny quit, boss," his consigliere Giovanni said from the doorway. He sounded tired. "That's the third one this month." Kalen didn't turn around. "Let me guess, Sophia threw a fit?" "No." Sophia just sat there, staring at nothing. The nanny said, "She said the house feels like a tomb. She couldn't handle the silence." Kalen clenched his jaw. His daughter Sophia was 10 years old. She had lost her sight 3 years ago in the car bomb that killed his wife, Bella. Since that day, Sophia hadn't spoken a word. She existed in a world of darkness, and Kalen had built a fortress around her. He treated her like a porcelain doll that had already been glued back together once. One more crack, and she would be dust. "Find another one." Kalen commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. "And find a maid while you're at it. The house is a mess." Enter Rachel Vance. Rachel wasn't what you'd call a typical applicant for the Caruso estate. She wore a baggy grey cardigan, cheap sneakers, and glasses that were slightly too big for her face. Her resume said she had spent the last 5 years cleaning hotel rooms in Jersey. It was a lie. The truth was, Rachel had spent the last 5 years in a place much darker than a hotel running from a past that had almost killed her. She needed this job. Not for the money, but for the invisibility. The Caruso estate was the most secure place in the city. If she could hide in the shadow of the devil himself, maybe her ghosts wouldn't find her. The interview was short. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Galloway, a stern woman with hair like steel wool, looked Rachel up and down. "You keep your head down," Galloway snapped. "You clean what you're told, and under no circumstances are you to disturb Miss Sophia. The boss doesn't like the help getting too close to the girl. Is that clear?" "Crystal," Rachel said, her voice soft. But keeping her head down became impossible on day 3. Rachel was polishing the mahogany banister on the 2nd floor when she saw her. Sophia. The girl was sitting in the middle of the hallway, wearing a white lace dress that looked itchy and uncomfortable. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes covered by a silk ribbon. Kalen's idea. He hated seeing the scars around her eyes. Rachel watched as Dario, one of Kalen's new guards, walked down the hall. Dario was a man who smiled too much with his mouth and not enough with his eyes. He stopped in front of the blind girl. "Move, princess," Dario grunted. Sophia flinched. She scrambled to stand up, but her foot caught on the hem of her long dress. She stumbled, her hands grasping at the air. Dario laughed. He didn't reach out to steady her. He just watched her fall. "Careful. Daddy isn't here to catch you." Rachel's grip on her polishing rag tightened until her knuckles turned white. Her instinct, honed by years of survival, screamed at her to move, to strike, to take Dario down by the knees and drive his face into the floorboards. But she couldn't. She was just the maid. If she showed she knew how to throw a punch, her cover would be blown. She would be out on the street, and they would find her. So she did the only thing she could. She dropped her metal bucket. Clang! The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent hallway. Dario jumped, his hand flying to his holster. Sophia froze, trembling. "Sorry," Rachel gasped, dropping to her knees and frantically wiping up the imaginary spill. "So sorry, sir. Clumsy hands." Dario sneered at her. "Stupid girl. Watch yourself." He stepped over Sophia's legs and marched away. Once he was gone, the hallway went silent again. Rachel looked at the girl. Sophia was still on the floor, breathing hard, looking terrified of the space around her. "He's gone," Rachel whispered. Sophia didn't answer. She just pulled her knees to her chest. "You know," Rachel said, keeping her voice low as she pretended to scrub the floor near the girl. "My father used to say that just because the lights are out doesn't mean the monsters disappear. It just means you have to learn to see them differently." For the first time in 3 years, Sophia Caruso moved towards a person instead of away. She tilted her head, her ear facing Rachel. "How?" The word was a rusty whisper. Rachel looked up at the security camera, blinking in the corner of the ceiling. She knew Kaylin watched everything. She knew the rules. Do not touch the glass. "I can't tell you," Rachel whispered back. "But if you meet me in the library during my break, I can show you." That night, Kaylin returned home late. His suit was stained with expensive scotch and the scent of gunpowder. He checked the monitors in his study. He saw the new maid, Rachel, dusting the library. He saw his daughter sitting in the armchair nearby, listening to an audiobook. Safe, silent, unbroken. Kaylin turned off the screen, pouring himself a drink. He didn't know that the audiobook was just noise. He didn't know that under the cover of the rhythmic reading voice, the maid was whispering instructions on how to identify a man by the sound of his footsteps. Kaylin thought he had hired a cleaner. He didn't realize he had just let a wolf into the sheep pen, and the wolf was teaching the lamb how to bite. The training started small. It had to. Sophia had 0 muscle mass. She was thin, pale, and moved with the hesitation of someone who expected the floor to disappear beneath her at any moment. It had been 2 weeks since the incident in the hallway. Rachel had established a routine. She would clean the East Wing, where the nursery and library were, between 2:00 p.m. and 4:00 p.m. That was when Mrs. Galloway took her nap, and the guards rotated shifts. The library became their dojo. "Stand up," Rachel commanded softly. Sophia stood. She was wearing a dress again. Kaylin insisted on them. Dresses for a princess. Rachel hated them. They restricted movement. "I'm going to walk around you," Rachel said, kicking off her sneakers to move in her socks. "You have to point to where I am. Don't listen to my breathing. Listen to the displacement of air. Listen to the creak of the floorboards." "I can't," Sophia whimpered. "It's too dark." "Darkness is your friend, Sophia. In the dark, you are the queen. Everyone else is just stumbling around." Rachel moved. She had trained in Krav Maga and close-quarters combat for years before her life imploded, She knew how to move silently, but she made sure to step just heavily enough for a beginner to hear. Sophia pointed left. Rachel was on the right. Again, Sophia pointed center. Rachel was behind her. "I can't do it." Sophia's voice cracked, tears slipping out from under the silk ribbon. "Daddy says I'm sick. He says I'm broken." Rachel stopped. She walked over and knelt in front of the girl. This was dangerous territory. Contradicting the boss was a death sentence. "Your father loves you," Rachel said carefully. "But your father is a hammer. He thinks every problem is a nail. He thinks he can build a wall thick enough to keep the world out. But he can't." Rachel took Sophia's small, cold hand and placed it on her own throat. Sophia gasped and tried to pull away. "What are you doing? Feel that." Rachel pulsed her neck muscles. "This is a weak point. If someone grabs you, you don't need to be strong. You just need to be fast. You have 4 weapons on your body that are harder than bone. Elbows, knees, head, and fear. Fear makes you fast. Use it." Over the next month, the transformation was subtle, but Rachel saw it. Sophia stopped hunching her shoulders. She started walking with her chin up. She began to memorize the house, counting steps between the bed and the door and the stairs. But while Sophia was getting stronger, the atmosphere in the house was rotting. Kaylin was rarely home. A turf war with the Vesperi family had escalated. There were rumors of a mole inside the Caruso organization. Paranoia was high. The guards were doubled, but the quality was dropping. Kaylin was hiring mercenaries, now men with no loyalty, only greed. Dario was the worst of them. One Tuesday, Rachel was scrubbing the marble floors of the foyer. She saw Dario talking to another guard, Marcus, near the entrance. They were speaking in low tones, but Rachel had learned to read lips years ago. "Payment clears on Friday," Dario was saying. "Boss will be at the docks. House will be open." Rachel's blood ran cold. They weren't talking about a paycheck. They were talking about a hit. She looked at the clock. It was 3:45 p.m. Kaylin was gone. He wouldn't be back until midnight. She needed to warn him. But who would believe the maid? If she went to Giovanni the consigliere, and she was wrong, she'd be killed for spying. If she was right, but Giovanni was in on it, she'd be dead before she finished the sentence. She had to protect Sophia herself. She hurried up to the nursery. She found Sophia sitting on her bed, clutching a stuffed bear. "Elle," Sophia asked. She had started calling her Elle. "You're walking heavy. You're scared." Rachel locked the door. "We need to train harder today, Sophia. No games." "Why?" "Because the monsters are getting closer." Rachel went to the closet and pulled out a letter opener she had swiped from the study, a dull silver blade, but heavy enough to simulate a knife. "Today we learn disarming," Rachel said. "But I'm 10, Sophia argued, her voice trembling. "And the world doesn't care," Rachel snapped harsher than she intended. She softened her voice. "Listen to me. If someone grabs you from behind, you drop your weight. You become a stone. And then you strike back." "Daddy would be mad if he saw this," Sophia whispered. "Daddy isn't here." But he was. Downstairs, the front door slammed open. The turf war meeting had been cancelled. Kaylin Caruso was home 6 hours early, and he was in a foul mood. He had received a tip that the leak in his organization was coming from inside his own house staff. He stormed up the stairs, Giovanni trailing behind him. "Check the staff quarters," Kaylin barked. "Turn every room upside down. If I find a wire, I kill everyone." Kalen headed straight for the one place that gave him peace, his daughter's room. He needed to see her. He needed to remind himself why he did the terrible things he did. He reached the nursery door. It was locked. Kalen frowned. The nursery was never locked. Sophia? No answer. But he heard sounds. Scuffling, heavy breathing, a dull thud. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. He didn't wait for a key. He stepped back and kicked the door right below the lock. The wood splintered and the door flew open. The scene before him froze his heart. The room was dimly lit. In the center, his daughter was pinned against the wall. The maid Rachel had her forearm pressed against Sophia's throat. In Rachel's other hand, raised high, was a silver blade glinting in the light of the hallway. Sophia was crying out, struggling. "Drop it!" Kalen roared, his hand flying to his hip. He drew his custom 1911 pistol and leveled it at Rachel's head. The hammer clicked back. "Get away from her, or I will blow your brains out." Rachel froze. She didn't drop the knife. She didn't step back. She turned her head slowly, looking down the barrel of the most dangerous man in New York. "Don't shoot," Rachel said, her voice steady, terrifyingly calm. "You have 1 second." Kalen hissed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "1. Wait," a small voice screamed. It wasn't Rachel. Kalen's eyes flickered to his daughter. Sophia wasn't crying in pain. She was crying in frustration. "I missed," Sophia yelled, stomping her foot. I missed the block." "Don't shoot her, Daddy. I missed the block." Kalen blinked. The adrenaline was still pumping, making his hands shake, but the words slowly filtered through. "Block." Rachel slowly lowered the letter opener. She stepped back, hands raised, palms open. "Check the grip, Mr. Caruso," she said softly. "Look at her hands." Kalen lowered the gun an inch. He looked at his blind daughter. Sophia wasn't cowering. She was standing in a defensive stance, her knees bent. Her hands raised in a perfect Krav Maga guard position, protecting her face and throat. "What?" Kalen breathed out, the anger replaced by a confusion that was almost dizzying. "What is this? I'm teaching her how to survive you," Rachel said. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Kalen looked from the maid, a woman he had dismissed as a nobody, to his daughter, who looked fiercer than he had ever seen her. "Survive me." Kalen stepped into the room, holstering his gun, but keeping his hand near it. His eyes were dark voids. "You think I am the threat?" "I think you are a man with many enemies, Mr. Caruso," Rachel said, standing her ground. "And you have left the door to the sheep pen open. Someone had to teach her how to bite." Kalen walked up to Rachel. He towered over her, radiating heat and violence. "You were hired to clean, not to play soldier." "I'm not playing," Rachel whispered, looking him dead in the eye. "And neither is Dario." Kalen stiffened at the name. "What did you say?" "Dario," Rachel repeated. "And Marcus. They're selling you out. Friday, at the docks. But they aren't waiting until Friday to take the house." Kalen stared at her. "How do you know this?" "Because," Rachel said, "before I was a maid, I hunted men like them." The silence in the nursery was shattered, not by a scream, but by the heavy, ominous click of Kalen holstering his weapon. He didn't look at Rachel. He looked at his daughter, who was still breathing hard, her small chest rising and falling in a rhythm that matched the woman standing beside her. "Giovanni," Kalen said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. The consigliere appeared in the doorway, his face pale. He had seen the gun drawn. He had expected a body. "Boss, take Sophia to the safe room. Lock it from the inside. Do not open it for anyone but me, not even for yourself." "Daddy." Sophia's voice trembled, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind the fear of a 10-year-old child. "Are you going to hurt Elle?" Kalen looked at the maid. His eyes were searching her face, looking for a crack in the porcelain, a tremor in her hands. He found nothing. She stood with the stillness of a statue in a graveyard. "No, tesoro," Kalen lied smoothly. "Rachel and I are just going to have a chat about her employment history." Giovanni gently took Sophia's hand. As they left, Rachel didn't move. She waited. "To my office," Kalen commanded. "Walk in front of me. If your hands move below your waist, I will shoot you in the spine." "Understood," Rachel said. The walk to the office felt like a funeral procession. The hallway seemed longer than usual, the shadows deeper. When they entered the office, the heavy oak door thudded shut, sealing them in a soundproof box of leather and expensive whiskey. Kalen didn't sit behind his desk. He leaned against it, crossing his arms. He looked like a king, deciding whether to execute a peasant. "Who are you?" he asked. "And don't tell me you're a maid from Jersey. Maids don't know how to disarm a knife. Maids don't know how to check for blind spots in a nursery." Rachel adjusted her glasses. For a moment she looked like the tired woman who scrubbed toilets. Then she reached up and took the glasses off. She folded them and placed them on a side table. Her eyes changed. Without the frames, she didn't look soft. She looked sharp, predatory. "My name is Rachel Vance," she said. "But 5 years ago, in a file that no longer exists at the CIA, I was listed as Asset 404. They called me the Chimera." Kalen didn't blink, but the air in the room shifted. He knew the name. Everyone in the underworld knew the myths of the Chimera, a wet work specialist used for jobs that governments couldn't officially sanction. "The Chimera died in a safe-house explosion in Beirut," Kalen said slowly. "I staged it," Rachel replied. "I was tired, Mr. Caruso. I was tired of killing for men who didn't care about the collateral damage. I wanted out. I wanted to disappear. So I became a ghost. I became a maid." Kalen laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "And you chose my house to hide in the house of the biggest crime lord in Chicago." "The safest place to hide is in the lion's den," Rachel countered. "Nobody looks for a dead CIA assassin scrubbing the floors of the Caruso estate. It was perfect, until I saw how your men treated your daughter." Kalen's face darkened. He pushed off the desk and stalked toward her. He stopped inches from her face. She smelled of lemon polish and fearlessness. "You think you can judge me?" he hissed. "I protect her." "You suffocate her," Rachel whispered, not backing down. "You treat her like she's already dead. I treated her like she's alive. And because I did, I heard what you missed." Kalen stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. He was reading her micro-expressions, looking for deceit. He saw only a fierce, burning protectiveness that mirrored his own. He turned his back on her, a test of trust, and poured 2 glasses of scotch. He handed one to her. "Tell me about Dario," he said. Rachel took the glass but didn't drink. "He's gambling heavy. He owes 50 grand to the Vesperi family. They bought his debt 2 weeks ago. In exchange, he gives them access. And Marcus? Marcus follows Dario. He's weak. He'll do whatever Dario says." Kalen took a sip, the amber liquid burning his throat. "You said the attack is Friday." "That's what they said. But criminals get nervous. If they think you're onto them, they'll move the timeline up." "What do you suggest?" Kalen asked. It was a surreal moment, the Don asking the maid for tactical advice. "Don't fire them," Rachel said. If you fire them, the Vesperi family knows the jig is up, and they'll strike the house with heavy artillery. Keep them close. Let them think they're safe, and tonight, you let me stand guard inside the house. Not as a maid, as what I am." Kalen looked at her hands, hands that had scrubbed his floors and taught his daughter to kill. "You're hired," Kalen said. "But Rachel, yes, boss. If anything happens to Sophia, I won't need a gun to kill you. I'll do it with my bare hands." Rachel took a sip of the scotch. "If anything happens to Sophia, Mr. Caruso, I'll be dead long before you get to me." The atmosphere in the dining room that evening was thick enough to choke on. The chandelier crystals tinkled softly from the draft of the air conditioning, casting fractured rainbows across the table. It was 7:00 p.m. Outside, a thunderstorm was rolling in off Lake Michigan. Lightning flashed, illuminating the long, polished table in harsh bursts of white light. Kalen sat at the head of the table. Sophia sat to his right. Rachel was back in her uniform, standing by the sideboard with a pitcher of water playing the part of the invisible servant. But her eyes were constantly scanning the room, the windows, the shadows, the woost. Dario stood by the double doors, his arms crossed. He looked bored. But Rachel noticed the sweat on his brow. She noticed how his hand kept drifting to his earpiece. "Eat, Sophia," Kalen said gently. Sophia picked up her fork. She looked small in the massive chair. "I'm not hungry, Daddy." "You need your strength," Kalen said. He cut a piece of steak on his own plate, the knife screeching against the china. The sound made Dario flinch. He's nervous, Rachel thought. Something is wrong. It's too quiet. "Daddy," Sophia asked, her head tilting to the side. "Why is the house humming?" Kalen paused his fork halfway to his mouth. "Humming. It's just the storm, baby." "No," Sophia insisted. She closed her sightless eyes, focusing. "It's a low hum, like the generator is trying to turn on, but the power is still on." Rachel's head snapped up. She looked at the chandelier. The bulbs were flickering, barely noticeable, but it was there. A power surge. "They're hacking the security grid," Rachel realized. "They aren't cutting the power. They're looping the feed." She caught Kalen's eye. She tapped her wrist twice, a signal they had agreed upon in the office. "Time is up." Kalen wiped his mouth with a napkin and stood up slowly. "Dario." "Yeah, boss." Dario straightened up, trying to look casual. "Go check the circuit breakers in the basement. Sophia says the lights are humming. Her ears are better than ours." Dario hesitated. A flicker of panic crossed his face. If he went to the basement, he'd be away from his post when the hit team arrived. "It's probably just the thunder, boss. I shouldn't leave the room." "I didn't ask for your opinion," Kalen said, his voice dropping an octave. "I gave you an order." Dario's hand twitched near his gun. The air in the room suddenly became electric. The pretense was dissolving. Dario knew that Kalen knew. "I can't do that, Kalen," Dario said, dropping the boss. Kalen smiled a cold, shark-like grin. "And why is that?" "Because," Dario said, drawing his weapon, "my shift is over." Click. The lights went out. Total darkness engulfed the room. The thunder crashed outside, shaking the windows. In that split second of chaos, 3 things happened at once. First, the sound of glass shattering. Sophia had thrown her water goblet, not at random, but directly at the sound of Dario's voice. Second, the muzzle flare of a gun. Dario fired blindly into the dark. The bullet struck the heavy oak chair where Kalen had been sitting a second ago, sending splinters flying. Third, Rachel moved. She didn't need to see. She had memorized the room. 7 steps to the table. 3 steps to the girl. Down, Rachel screamed, diving through the dark. She tackled Sophia out of her chair just as a second bullet tore through the upholstery. They hit the expensive Persian rug hard. Rachel covered Sophia's body with her own, shielding her. "Daddy," Sophia screamed. "Stay down!" Kalen's voice roared from the other side of the room. 2 gunshots rang out loud, booming shots from Kalen's .45. There was a grunt of pain, then the sound of heavy boots running out of the dining room doors. Dario was hit, but he was fleeing. "He's letting them in!" Rachel yelled over the thunder. "He's going to the front gate to override the maglocks." "Giovanni!" Kalen shouted into the dark. "Secure the east wing!" But there was no answer. The radio silence was deafening. Kalen crawled over to where Rachel and Sophia lay. He touched Rachel's shoulder, his grip like iron. "Is she hurt?" "I'm okay, Daddy," Sophia whispered. She wasn't crying. She was trembling. Yes, but her breathing was controlled. In, out, just like Rachel had taught her. "The backup generator will kick in any second," Kalen said. "No," Rachel said, pulling Sophia up to a crouch. "They disabled it. They want us blind." "They made a mistake," Sophia said. Her voice was small but strange. It lacked the terror that should have been there. Kalen couldn't see his daughter in the pitch black, but he could hear the change in her tone. "What do you mean?" Kalen asked. "They think the dark helps them," Sophia whispered. She reached out and grabbed Rachel's hand, then her father's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "But the dark is mine." Rachel felt a surge of pride so fierce it almost brought tears to her eyes. She squeezed Sophia's hand. "Lead us, Sophia," Rachel commanded. "Get us to the library. The walls are thicker there." "Follow my footsteps," Sophia said. "Don't scuff your feet. Walk toe to heel." The blind princess of the Caruso crime family stood up in the suffocating darkness. For 10 years, she had navigated a world without light, while Dario and the Vesperi hit squad were fumbling with flashlights and night vision goggles that would be blinded by the strobing lightning. Sophia Caruso was perfectly at home. She moved quickly, weaving around the fallen chairs and the serving cart. Kalen, the most powerful man in the city, found himself stumbling, forced to rely entirely on the small hand of his daughter to guide him. They reached the hallway. The sound of breaking glass came from the front entrance downstairs. "They're inside," Kalen cursed. "I have 6 men on the perimeter. Where are they?" "Dead or bought," Rachel said grimly. "We're on our own, Kalen." "Library," Sophia whispered. 12 steps. Turn left. Watch out for the vase." They moved like phantoms. They reached the library, and Kalen shoved them inside, locking the heavy mahogany doors. He dragged a heavy desk in front of it. "This won't hold them for long," Kalen said, checking his magazine. "I have 7 rounds left." "I have a knife," Rachel said, pulling a ceramic blade from her garter, another secret she had kept. "And I," Sophia said, moving toward the far wall of the library, where the decorative antique weapons hung. "I have the advantage." "Sophia, get under the desk," Kalen ordered. "No," Rachel said. She walked over to the window and pulled the heavy velvet curtains shut, blocking out the flashes of lightning. The room became an abyss. Absolute, total blackness. "What are you doing?" Kalen demanded. "Leveling the playing field," Rachel said. She moved to stand beside him. "They have tactical gear. They have numbers. But they're used to seeing. Take that away, and they panic." "They're coming," Sophia whispered. She pointed a shaking finger at the door. Kalen strained his ears. He heard nothing. "Are you sure, baby? 3 men." Sophia said, her ear turned toward the door. "Heavy boots, One is dragging his leg, that's Dario. The other two are breathing hard. They're at the door. Kalen raised his gun. He aimed where the door should be. He realized then that for the first time in his life, he wasn't the protector. He was the weapon. His daughter was the radar, and the maid was the trigger. The doorknob rattled. Then a voice shouted from the other side. "Kalen! Come out, you son of a butch! We have the gas. We'll burn you out." "Gas?" Rachel whispered. "They're going to poke us out." "We can't stay here," Kalen said. "We go up," Rachel said. "To the roof." "No," Sophia cut in. "The laundry chute." Kalen paused. "The laundry chute. It's too small for me." "Not the chute," Sophia said. "The service crawl space behind it. I found it when I was playing hide and seek." "You play hide and seek?" Kalen asked, shocked. "I play with Elle," Sophia said. "Come on, I can hear them setting the charges on the door." Kalen felt a wave of shame wash over him. He didn't know his own house. He didn't know his own daughter. Boom! The library door blew inward, sending wood shards flying. Smoke billowed in. "Go!" Kalen screamed, firing 2 shots into the smoke to cover their retreat. They scrambled into the service closet. Sophia popped a hidden panel open, something Rachel must have shown her. They squeezed into the narrow space between the walls, just as flashlights swept the library. "Clear!" a voice shouted. "They're gone! Find them!" Dario's voice screamed, sounding wet and gurgled. "Find the girl, kill the maid, but keep the girl. The Vesperi want the girl." In the darkness of the walls, huddled together in the dust and insulation, Kalen Caruso wrapped his arms around his daughter and the woman who had saved them. "You were right," Kalen whispered to Rachel, his lips brushing her ear in the tight space. "About what?" "I built a cage," he murmured. "But you gave her the key." "We're not out yet," Rachel replied. "Now comes the hard part. We have to hunt." The space between the walls smelled of old wood dry rot and the metallic tang of copper piping. It was a suffocatingly narrow channel, barely 2 feet wide, running like a forgotten artery through the heart of the mansion. Kalen Caruso, a man used to wide-open spaces and the best Italian leather, was now crawling on his hands and knees through fiberglass insulation. His suit was ruined. His knees were bleeding. But his grip on his daughter's ankle, who was crawling ahead of him, was unbreakable. "Stop," Sophia whispered. The command was barely a breath, but Kalen and Rachel froze instantly. They were positioned behind the air vent that looked out into the main kitchen. Through the metal slats, the beam of a tactical flashlight sliced through the dusty air. "Check the pantry," a voice growled. It was Marcus. "Dario says they didn't leave the house. The perimeter is sealed." Rachel squeezed past Kalen, her body pressed tight against his in the cramped space. The intimacy of the moment was jarring, the heat of her body, the scent of her sweat mixed with the dust. She peered through the slats. 2 tangos, Rachel whispered into Kalen's ear. "Assault rifles, body armor. They're professional." "I have 7 rounds," Kalen whispered back. "And no angle." "We don't shoot," Rachel murmured. She looked at Sophia. "Sophia, what do you hear?" Sophia closed her eyes, her face smeared with soot. She looked like a fallen angel. "One is near the fridge. He's heavy, maybe 200 pounds. He has a wheeze in his left lung. The other is near the island. He's tapping a ring against the granite. Tap, tap, tap. He's impatient." "The impatient ones make mistakes," Rachel said. She turned to Kalen. "Do you trust me?" Kalen looked at this woman. This maid who had lied to him every day for months yet was currently the only reason his daughter was alive. With my life, Kaylin said, but not with hers. Then let me clear the room, Rachel said. You keep her safe. Rachel reached into her pocket. She didn't have a grenade. She didn't have C4. But she had the items she had swiped from the cleaning cart before they ran. A bottle of high-concentrate ammonia and a small bottle of bleach. You're going to gun them. Kaylin realized his eyes widening. Just enough to blind them, Rachel said. Mustard gas is a cruel teacher. She poured the contents of the small bleach bottle into a plastic cup she found in the debris of the crawl space. Then she prepared the ammonia. She looked at the vent cover. It was screwed on but loose. On my mark, Rachel signaled. She kicked the vent. Clang! In the kitchen, the two gunmen spun around, weapons raised. There, Marcus yelled. The vent! They opened fire. Bullets shredded the drywall around the vent, sending plaster flying like snow. Kaylin shielded Sophia with his body, curling over her like a shell. But Rachel didn't retreat. She waited for the reload. Click. In that 1 second of silence, Rachel shoved the cup of chemicals through the broken slats and tossed it onto the kitchen floor. The mixture splashed, reacting instantly. A cloud of noxious burning chloramine gas erupted into the air. Eyes! My eyes! The man by the island screamed, dropping his rifle to claw at his face. Move! Rachel commanded. She kicked the vent grate out completely. She dropped into the kitchen, rolling across the floor, staying low under the rising gas cloud. She was a blur of motion. She grabbed a cast-iron skillet from the hanging rack, a crude weapon, but deadly in the hands of a chimera. Crack! She swung the skillet with terrified precision, connecting with the knee of the wheezing man. Bone shattered. As he fell, she grabbed his falling rifle. Kaylin dropped down next. He didn't need a skillet. He had his rage. He pistol-whipped the second man, the one blinded by the gas, sending him unconscious to the floor. Clear! Rachel coughed, her eyes watering from the fumes. We have weapons now. She tossed the captured AR-15 to Kaylin. He caught it, checking the chamber with practiced ease. Sophia, Kaylin called out, lifting his daughter down from the vent. Stay low. The air is toxic up high. They moved into the pantry, closing the door to block out the gas. It was quiet here, just the sound of their ragged breathing. Kaylin looked at Rachel. She was wiping blood from her lip. She looked wild, beautiful, and terrifying. You fight like a demon, Kaylin said. I learned from demons, she replied shortly. Why? Kaylin asked the question, burning a hole in his chest. You could have run. When the lights went out, you could have left us. Rachel looked at Sophia, who was clinging to Kaylin's leg. I lost a daughter once, Rachel whispered the truth, finally slipping out. 7 years ago. I couldn't save her. I won't let another little girl die in the dark. Kaylin felt a shock wave go through him. The pieces fit. The sadness in her eyes. The ferocity of her protection. Rachel, don't. She cut him off. She reloaded her stolen pistol. We can cry later. Right now, Dario is in the Great Hall. I know his tactics. He'll make a stand there. It's the only way out. He has my men, Kaylin said. Or he killed them. He killed them, Sophia said softly. Kaylin looked down. How do you know? Because the house is silent, Sophia said, tears finally leaking from her sightless eyes. Usually I can hear the guards' hearts. I can hear their boots. Now, I only hear Dario. Kaylin's jaw tightened until it hurt. Then we end it. No more hiding. No, Rachel said. We don't just end it. We send a message. She looked at the circuit breaker panel, located in the back of the pantry. "Sophia," Rachel said, "can you navigate the Great Hall in total silence?" "Yes," Sophia said bravely. "Good," Rachel said, reaching for the main breaker, "because we are going to turn this house into a graveyard." The Great Hall of the Caruso estate was a masterpiece of architecture. High, vaulted ceilings, a dual staircase made of marble, and a massive crystal chandelier that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Now, it was a kill box. Dario stood in the center of the room. He was leaning heavily on his good leg, his thigh bandaged where Kalen's bullet had grazed him. He was surrounded by 4 remaining mercenaries. They were nervous. They had heard the screaming in the kitchen. They had lost contact with Marcus. "Come out, Kalen!" Dario shouted, his voice echoing off the marble. "It's over. The Vesper are 5 minutes away. Give me the girl, and I'll give you a quick death." Silence answered him. Then from the darkness of the East Wing corridor, a sound emerged. Tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of a cane. Dario raised his gun. "Fire at movement." But there was no movement, just the tapping. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "It's a trick," one of the mercenaries hissed. "Hold your fire," Dario ordered. He wiped sweat from his eyes. "He's trying to spook us." Suddenly, a small object rolled across the floor from the shadows. It stopped in the center of the room, illuminated by the mercenaries' tactical lights. It was Sophia's music box, a small, delicate thing that played Claire de Lune. Dario stared at it. "What the hell?" The box clicked open. The music began to play. Soft, haunting, melodic, tinkling notes filled the tense silence of the room. Ding, ding, ding. "Distraction!" Dario screamed, spinning around. "Watch your 6! Crash!" The high windows above the staircase shattered inward, not from the outside, but from the balcony above. Kalen Caruso didn't rappel down. He didn't sneak. He stood up on the balcony railing, backlit by a flash of lightning from the storm outside, looking like the god of war. "Dario!" Kalen roared. The mercenaries looked up, distracted. That was the mistake. From the ground floor, shadows, Rachel surged forward. She didn't shoot. She slid across the polished marble, using the momentum to slice the Achilles tendon of the nearest mercenary with her ceramic knife. He went down, screaming. Kalen opened fire from the balcony with the AR-15. He rained controlled bursts down upon them. 2 mercenaries dropped before they could even raise their rifles. Dario dove behind a marble pillar, returning fire wildly. "Kill him! Kill the girl!" But where was the girl? Sophia was moving. In the chaos of gunfire and screaming, a small figure in a ruined white dress was moving along the wall. She wasn't running. She was sliding, feeling the vibrations of the floor. Rachel had told her exactly where to go. The fuse box behind the tapestry. Sophia reached the heavy velvet tapestry. She could hear the bullets chipping the stone inches from her head. She was terrified. Her heart felt like it was going to explode. But she remembered Rachel's voice. "Fear makes you fast." She slipped behind the tapestry. Her fingers found the sub-panel. Rachel had taught her this too. The red lever. "Pull it down." Sophia reached up, standing on her tiptoes. She grabbed the cold metal lever. "Now, Sophia!" Rachel's voice screamed from the center of the room. Sophia pulled the lever. The emergency lights, which had been casting a dim, eerie glow, died. Absolute darkness. The great hall became a cavern. The mercenaries, their eyes adjusted to the dim light, were suddenly blind. Their tactical lights were blinding each other in the confusion. But for Sophia, for Rachel, and for Kalen, who had been training his eyes in the dark for the last hour, it was an opportunity. Kalen stopped shooting. He vaulted over the railing, dropping 10 feet to the floor below. He landed with a heavy roll coming up in a crouch. He listened. He heard Dario's jagged breathing behind the pillar to his left. "You forgot one thing, Dario." Kalen's voice boomed out of the dark. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere. "Yeah." "What's that?" Dario yelled, firing blindly into the dark. Bang, bang, bang. "You're fighting in my house," Kalen said, moving silently in his socks. "And my daughter owns the dark." Sophia, still behind the tapestry, picked up a heavy vase. She didn't throw it at Dario. She threw it at the wall opposite of her father. Smash! Dario spun towards the sound, firing his last rounds at the noise. "Got you!" He clicked empty. Kalen stepped out from the shadows right behind Dario. He pressed the cold barrel of the AR-15 against the back of Dario's head. "Game over," Kalen whispered. Dario froze. He dropped his empty gun. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the soft dying notes of the music box on the floor. "Kalen," Dario stammered, his voice cracking. "Wait. The Vesper, Harry, they forced me. They threatened my family. I don't care," Kalen said. "You touched my family. I can help you," Dario begged, sinking to his knees. "I know their operations. I can be a mole." Kalen looked at Rachel. She had dispatched the last mercenary and was standing over him, chest heaving. She looked at Kalen and gave a small, grim nod. Then Kalen looked toward the tapestry. "Sophia, come out," Kalen said softly. Sophia stepped out. She looked small, fragile, and utterly unbroken. She walked toward her father's voice, navigating the bodies on the floor without tripping. She stopped beside him. "Daddy," she whispered. "Close your ears, Tesoro." Kalen said, his hand gently covering her head, pressing her face into his side. "No," Sophia said, pulling back slightly. Her blind eyes were turned toward where Dario knelt. "He called me broken daddy. He said I was useless." Dario looked up at the blind girl, a flicker of true fear in his eyes for the first time. "I'm not broken," Sophia said, her voice steady. "I'm just different." Kalen looked at his daughter with a swelling pride that was almost painful. He looked back at Dario. "You heard the lady," Kalen said. Bang! The gunshot marked the end of the betrayal. Kalen let the rifle drop. He fell to his knees and pulled Sophia into a hug so tight he thought he might crush her. He buried his face in her hair, shaking. The adrenaline was crashing. "You're safe," he sobbed. "I've got you. I've got you." Rachel watched them from a few feet away. She leaned against a pillar, her adrenaline fading, replaced by a searing end in her side, where she had been grazed by a bullet, something she hadn't mentioned. She slid down the pillar to the floor, clutching her side. Her job was done. The asset was safe. "Rachel." Sophia pulled away from her father. "Where is Rachel? I can smell blood." Kalen's head snapped up. He saw the dark stain spreading on Rachel's uniform. "Rachel," he scrambled over to her. His hands that had just taken a life, now desperately trying to save one. He pressed his hands against her wound. "Don't you die on me," Kalen commanded, his voice panicking. "That is an order, do you hear me? You don't get to die." Rachel smiled weakly. Her glasses were gone, her hair was a mess, and she was bleeding out on the expensive marble. I think I'm fired, boss," she wheezed. "I broke the vase." "I'll buy you 1,000 vases," Kalen swore, lifting her into his arms. "Giovanni, get the car. Get the medic now." The doors burst open. Not the Vesperi, but Giovanni and the loyal reinforcements finally breaking through the perimeter. As Kalen carried the bleeding Maid out of the ruined hall with his blind daughter holding onto his coat, he knew one thing for certain. The Caruso family had changed tonight. The walls he had built were gone. But in their place, he had found something much stronger. He had found a pack. It took 3 weeks for the doctors to clear Rachel for light duty, though Kalen had forbidden her from lifting a finger. The Maid uniform was gone, replaced by comfortable clothes that fit her properly, purchased by Giovanni on Kalen's specific orders. The Caruso estate had changed. The broken windows were replaced with reinforced bulletproof glass. The security team had been purged and rebuilt from the ground up, with every new hire personally vetted by both Giovanni and, surprisingly, Rachel. On a crisp autumn morning, Kalen sat on the terrace overlooking the garden. He watched as Sophia ran across the grass. She wasn't stumbling. She was running with a tether holding onto a guide wire that had been installed along the garden path, laughing as the wind hit her face. "She looks happy," a voice said behind him. Kalen didn't jump. He turned to see Rachel standing there, leaning slightly on a cane, though her strength was returning daily. She wore a simple black turtleneck and jeans, looking less like a servant and more like the partner she had become. "She is happy," Kalen said, standing up to pull out a chair for her, "because she isn't afraid anymore." Rachel sat down with a wince, but her smile was genuine. "And you? Are you afraid?" "Every day," Kalen admitted, pouring her a cup of coffee. "I'm afraid the Vesperi family will try again. I'm afraid the past will come back for you." "The Vesperi are gone, Kalen," Rachel said quietly. "You made sure of that." It was true. In the days following the attack, while Rachel lay in the hospital wing of the house Kalen had gone to war, he didn't send men. He went himself. He dismantled the Vesperi operation piece by piece, leaving a clear message to the underworld. The Caruso family is off limits, all of them. "And as for my past," Rachel continued, taking the coffee, "let them come. They'll have to get through you." Kalen looked at her, really looked at her. The lines of worry that had etched his face for 3 years seemed to have softened. "You're not the maid anymore, Rachel. You know that, right?" "I know," she teased. "The pay was terrible anyway." Kalen chuckled, a sound that felt foreign in his chest. "I need a head of security. Someone who can train my men. Someone who can train her." He gestured to Sophia, who had stopped running and was now practicing her kata in the grass, slow, deliberate movements of defense. "She's a quick learner," Rachel said proudly. "She's already asking when she can learn to throw a punch." "One day," Kalen sighed, "but for now I just want her to be a child." "She can be both, Kalen. She can be a child, and she can be a survivor." Sophia stopped her practice. She tilted her head, her ears catching the sound of their voices on the wind. She let go of the guide wire and walked across the grass toward the terrace, counting her steps perfectly. "Daddy L," she called out. "We're here, Tesoro," Kalen said. Sophia climbed the steps and found her way to them. She didn't sit. She stood between them, holding one of Kalen's hands and one of Rachel's. "Are we safe now?" Sophia asked. Kalen looked at Rachel, the ex-assassin and the Mafia Don, 2 people with blood on their hands, united by the love of a little blind girl who saw more than both of them combined. "Yes," Kaylin promised, squeezing her hand. "We are safe, because nobody messes with this family." Sophia smiled a bright, fearless smile. "Good, because I have a math test tomorrow, and that's much scarier than bad guys." Laughter filled the terrace, rising up into the morning sky, chasing away the last of the shadows in the Caruso house. And that is the story of how a ruthless mafia don learned that the strongest walls aren't made of stone, but of trust. Kaylin Caruso thought he was hiring a maid to clean his floors, but he ended up hiring a warrior to clean up his life. He learned that his daughter wasn't a piece of glass to be protected, but a diamond, strong, unbreakable, and capable of shining even in the darkest of rooms. In the end, they weren't just a boss, a maid, and a child. They were a pack. And the world learned the hard way. Never corner a wolf, especially one that's blind. Wow, what a ride. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And I have a question for you. If you were Kaylin, would you have forgiven Rachel for lying about who she was, or would you have kicked her out? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a story. We have more tales of betrayal, redemption, and twisted romance coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.